I think there's a lot of fatigue surrounding the topic of Jeffrey Epstein because over the years we've just heard so much about it and there just doesn't seem to be any accountability. I mean, to this day, in 2026, Prince Andrew is still walking free, even though he's, it seems like every year he's getting downgraded one more level. But I mean, we know that Epstein worked with a lot of powerful people, including Les Wexner, the former owner of Victoria's Secret, and of course Bill Clinton, who was just deposed recently along with Hillary. We know that there's a lot of guilty people that are not being held to account. We don't really know why. I don't want to get into all that. What I want to do is kind of zero in on something. I thought it would be interesting as an exercise to look up Courtney Love in these files. I've heard her name was in here, but I've never really looked into it. I don't know anything about it. So I thought, okay, well, there's like a million files here and documents. Why don't I just type her name here and see what it says? So if you go to www.justice.gov/Epstein, you can go ahead and type Courtney Love, and this pulls up 14 results. And I looked through all of these, and one of the first things I noticed is that there's a lot of redundant information here. Some of these entries appear to have the same information, and when you click on some of these, it'll even repeat the same information within the same link. And one of these was actually a dead link. So let's just quickly go through one by one. So this first one here is maybe one of the more interesting. This is an email to Jeffrey Epstein from Redacted, but that Redacted is titled Popular in Your Network. So I was thinking, oh, this almost doesn't sound like it's from a human. It sounds kind of auto-generated, and I think that's what it is. I consulted the oracle known as ChatGPT, and ChatGPT concurred that this was probably an automatically sent message because it was a topic that was mentioning Jeffrey Epstein, and that she was maybe in his circle of social, online social or whatever, or maybe not. Maybe just purely because, if Courtney Love says something about Jeffrey Epstein in reaction to her name being stated as being in his black book, well, that's going to go a little viral. And so I'm willing to believe that that's the reason Epstein got this automatic message. It doesn't automatically mean he knew Courtney Love or she was in his circle. So this was June 25th of 2015, which is the year that the court proceedings began involving a guy named Alfredo Rodriguez, who was the one who produced the book originally. He used to work for Epstein. So we'll talk more about that a little bit later. This one here, it's a very long transcript of a court case. So you can see this was Saturday, October 17, 2015. And this was in reference to, I guess, the black book produced by Alfredo Rodriguez, who interestingly died the previous year. So he was never able to really attend these court proceedings because he was gone. But in these interviews, a guy named Paul G. Cassell, who at one point, I guess, represented some of the victims of Epstein's, the abuse of the women or the trafficking, the prostitution of young women. So this guy's being interviewed and he's being asked about, at one point, Courtney Love, why her name is in the black book and why it's circled. And you can see right here, do you know who she is? He says, not off the top of my head, no. In your opinion, was Courtney Love involved in sex trafficking? So you can see she's being brought up specifically, so that's kind of interesting there. This next link lists a bunch of people: Courtney Love, Joe Perry, Lana Del Rey, Marilyn Manson. Some kind of event that's being discussed. I don't know how this is connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Maybe it's involving some entity he was involved with. I mean, he dealt with a lot of people. It's important to remember that, you know, if you sat there and wrote out everything you did, you know, over the course of a couple years, and you wrote down all the names of people you're involved with, just because you had a brush with someone or had an email exchange or even, you know, it doesn't mean that they're involved with the intimate affairs of your life any more than that was the case with Epstein. In his case, it's even more, you got to be even more discerning because he knew a lot of important people. And of course, a lot of those people probably were co-conspirators in whatever he was doing. You don't know who was. You've got to look at each case fairly. And that goes for Courtney Love too. Just because she's mentioned somewhere doesn't mean she was involved with him, but you know, in his illicit affairs. But what we're doing is we're just looking at the information that's available to us, which there isn't a whole lot, and we're seeing what it tells us objectively. So again, you know, redundant information here. This is from the same transcript that we just sort of looked at for a second. Now this is interesting, this link, because it's dead. See? Page not found. But this quote right here, he came to my house looking to party. Prince Andrew's billionaire friend is accused of preying on a girl. That little snippet, these are all little snippets of phrases. And I know this one here refers to a quote in Courtney Love's book because I found that by researching other things. We'll talk about that more in a minute. So this is an article talking about the Black Book, or also known as Jeffrey Epstein's address book, also known as the Holy Grail, which, as I said, was produced by Alfredo Rodriguez, Epstein's former house manager, who at the time that this article was put out was serving time for trying to sell it to attorneys. So all these names that are mentioned here, including Courtney Love, they're just taken directly from that book. So that's the significance of that entry. Well, this is really weird. This is all about Elvis Costello. It doesn't seem to have any relevance. Maybe if you really poke through it, you can find something. But yeah, I don't know. This is really weird. I mean, first of all, why is this whole thing about Elvis Costello's entire career in here? I don't see Epstein's name in there anywhere. And I looked through it, I glanced through it twice. I didn't see Courtney's name in there anywhere. Yet she's sort of listed right here, Joe Strummer and Courtney Love. Oh, that's a weird one. Something like this makes me think that maybe something was redacted from this link, or they're just putting stuff in here to make it seem like they're releasing more stuff. I mean, I hate to be that pessimistic right up front, but it does kind of feel that way. Like that's what's going on here. Anyway, next link, again, seems to mention the Duke came to my house looking to party. We already looked at that in a different link. And I actually looked through this entire thing twice, and I couldn't find where it says that. So again, I'm just wondering if some of this weird Courtney stuff is being taken out, or if this is just disorganized the way they did this. It just wasn't indexed correctly. I don't know. Guess I can guess all day. Here's another link that just has all these same names that are in the book. And this is because it's, again, the transcript of that court case that we already talked about earlier. You see how redundant this is already? No wonder there's a million pages, because they're just repeating shit over and over. Something about Courtney Love explaining to us. Okay, so this is some kind of diary, and I don't know who's writing it, but I'm wondering if it's Jeffrey Epstein who wrote this. Anyway, whoever wrote it mentions that they went to some kind of after party, and Courtney Love was there, and commented on the film that they all went to see. I guess was a Sean Penn film. So it's kind of interesting that Courtney Love is just this incident is being mentioned. So I don't know. I guess if this was written by Epstein and he's hanging out with Courtney Love after the Cannes Film Festival in 2011, I guess that's kind of noteworthy. At that point, Alfredo Rodriguez was, that was the year he was sentenced to serve 18 months. So it was out of the bag that Epstein was, a criminal at that point. In fact, he was first arrested, I think it was in 2006. Now, here's what's kind of interesting. If we look at the timeline, Courtney Love released this book, Dirty Blonde, The Diaries of Courtney Love, which this is worth some money now. I think it's kind of hard to get. Seems like it was printed once or twice and then it wasn't printed again. And what's interesting is when this was printed. This was published on October 31st, Halloween of 2006. 2006 was the same year that Jeffrey Epstein was first arrested. He was arrested in July. This came out in October. So this book came out 3 months after Jeffrey Epstein was first arrested. And in this book is a story. Prince Andrew shows up unexpectedly at Courtney's door around 1 a.m. with a security officer. She had been in bed and answered wearing slippers and a robe. He said he got her address from a mutual acquaintance and was, quote, looking for a fun night in Hollywood. She made him tea. They sat on her sofa and talked for like 45 minutes and he left. Now, does that sound weird or what? Prince Andrew shows up to her house at 1 a.m. looking for fun, wakes her up, and she makes him tea, and that's it. I don't know. Now, the reviews for this book are generally pretty good, but there was one person who commented, "What is the real meaning of this book? Why did she choose to publish it? And who was her intended audience?" And the reason why that review stood out to me is because if you've watched my other videos, especially the Mark Lanegan one, Lanegan, Cobain, and Other Mysteries, I talk about my theory that I think there's some deliberate information in Mark Lanegan's quote-unquote autobiography trying to sort of play damage control for Courtney Love and probably other people as well. And sticking with the idea that everything Courtney Love says and does has an ulterior motive, paraphrasing Tom Grant there, I think this book coming out when it did may actually have had something to do with playing damage control or trying to manipulate the perception of the entire Epstein thing, which had not yet blown up yet. But the appearance of Prince Andrew in the book is significant, and I believe this is the picture that's supposedly in the book, taken that night. So maybe if we were to look at this as some kind of damage control, how would that work? Well, everything on the surface seems like Prince Andrew is a sleazebag showing up at Courtney Love's door, at 1 a.m., wanting to have a good time, and you think it's going to be all about sex and something crazy, but she's like, no, I just made him tea, and it was nice and amusing and funny, ha ha ha, and then he left like a good man, It kind of makes it plausible that there would be stories about him turning up in places like this, but it was all innocent and nothing happened. That would be my take on how this would be some kind of preemptive damage control to head off the upcoming Prince Andrew scandal, which would only get worse and worse up to this very day that I recorded this. Now, supposedly Alfredo Rodriguez, this guy on the left here, he was a butler or house manager for Epstein around 2004, 2005. He was fired for reasons that I couldn't really find in the stuff I looked at. But Epstein was arrested in July 2006, and so this guy Rodriguez kind of says in so many words that his career was ruined because he couldn't get hired when people found out he worked for Epstein. And this came out, if you want to look at a sort of official source, This is vault.fbi.gov right here, and there's a PDF you can download, and it contains everything, well, a lot of stuff if you want to know about Alfredo Rodriguez. But basically, after he was fired from being Epstein's butler, he had a hard time finding work. So he attempted to take items that allegedly, were items used by Epstein, a black book of addresses and some documents. And he was interviewed in 2007 by the FBI, and I guess told them some stuff, but didn't tell them other stuff, and held back the black book, which he had forgotten that he had, or I don't know, or didn't know he had and found it later. I mean, his story sounds fishy too, to be honest. In 2008, Epstein reached a federal non-prosecution agreement and got 18 months. Now, this was a kind of a controversial thing. It kind of, without getting too much into the details, it kind of seems like this was, Epstein was being protected and given a lenient sentence. And I think this is where the whole case was sort of bumbled. And I think this is what Kash Patel was referring to when he said that, at that time, that's when they should have, went after people. And after the non-prosecution agreement was reached, a lot of what should have been used against Epstein was kind of put on the wayside or thrown out or whatever. I don't know how it all works, but that's sort of how I understand it, at least as described by the current administration's Department of Justice. So here's a video of Alfredo Rodriguez being interviewed, talking about, naked girls he saw on the computer and stuff. And he was trying to sell that black book for $50,000 because I guess he was broke. And in 2009, he got a subpoena that he had to, hand it over. And he demanded $50,000. He wasn't going to hand it over. So on November 3rd of 2009, agents seized the book and the other documents. And on December 1st, 2009, he was arrested. An arrest warrant was issued. And then December 8th, he was actually arrested. In 2010, Prince Andrew's connection to Epstein becomes more widely known. Rodriguez served his 18 months between 2011 and 2012. And I think somewhere they said that Rodriguez got a longer sentence than Epstein did originally, which is ironic, isn't it? The guy trying to blow the whistle gets punished more than the guy who actually committed the crimes, the real crimes. December 28, 2014, Alfredo Rodriguez dies, according to his widow. They said it was cancer or something. A lot of people think it was fishy because the court proceedings weren't until 2015. And obviously he died before those could occur with him in it. So they occurred without him, and I think those were the transcripts we were looking at earlier, talking about Courney Love and her name being circled there. There were some other names circled as well, including Donald Trump. So I'm not trying to say that the circling of the name automatically means guilt, nor does the individual interviewed in that transcript say or insinuate that that means guilt. He basically insinuates that it means likely they have knowledge of something. June 25th, 2015 was the date of that email to Epstein referencing Courtney because of the, I guess, tweet she made. And in the tweet she said, "Hey, about my name in Epstein's address book. It's creepy as fuck that I'm in that thing, I agree. I didn't know him, never met him, didn't know who he was. Apparently he collected celebrity phone numbers. The end. Hope he burns in Avicii hell." So did she know him? I don't know. Is the address book even authentic? If it is, and her name was in there and it was circled, I don't know what that means. It seems like maybe he knows her or wanted to know her. And maybe it was as she said. Maybe he just collected celebrity phone numbers, which doesn't quite sound like an adequate explanation, but who can prove otherwise? This taken into account, though, with the interaction with Prince Andrew, does make you wonder if there's more that Courtney knows that she's not saying. And in combination with her name being in the files and being circled. You know, to take a really cynical position, one could assume that the whole thing about the Black Book was all fake, just conjured up as, you know, a layer for people to focus on, people like me, and keep us from focusing on the truth, which is, you know, the actual crimes themselves, which probably deserve a lot more attention than they ever got. But, you know, we'll probably never know what the actual truth is. But sometimes I do videos like this to just document stuff and maybe pick up later. I mean, it certainly wouldn't surprise me if Courtney Love was somehow involved and in circles with people like Prince Andrew, considering the very disturbing information that I cover in my series Acid Music Mindcrime. Her own father, Hank Harrison, talks about how, you know, she was basically out there whoring herself and selling drugs and taking drugs, and not just in the U.S., but going all over the world, going to London, going to England. She spent a lot of time in England. And Japan or China or wherever else. I'll link that video in the description. And I've got more on Hank Harrison, actually. I'm working on a new video blog where I'm gonna dig into that a little bit more. I got some new information to add to that.